Hey students, it's Dr. Miller, and I'm going to give you some feedback on your assignment number 7, which is the one where we did portraits. I was really pleased with a bunch of them, and I think you did some great work on this. Let's review what we were looking for. The portrait is where you are really trying to capture something about a person or maybe a small group of people, and you're going to be using your techniques of your camera, but also lighting, and you could manipulate backdrops and poses and props and things like that. Most portrait photography is really about the face, and you want to really kind of zone in on the face. And we had some photographs that were okay photographs, but they weren't really portraits because they didn't really show the portrait style of the face. A good portrait is actually a partnership between the subject or model and the photographer. And some of you obviously worked very well with the individuals that you were using as your posers or your subjects. Now, there is some confusion about what is a candid shot and what is a portrait, and I will admit that the line is gray. But what I wanted you to do was to create situations where you may have been working with a model or an individual, but you didn't necessarily make it look like a portrait, like a headshot. But we had some success with that and some that weren't. I'm going to share with you the good stuff. That's typically what I tend to do. I don't want to pick out photographs that are submitted that don't really quite measure up to what I was looking for. So if you see your photographs in this, you can assume you're doing some things right. If you don't see a lot of your photographs, you're maybe missing the mark a little bit, but pay attention and maybe you can apply some of this for the next time. Portraits are things that you're going to be taking photographs of for the rest of your life. So if you can get really good at it, it's a cool thing to be able to take good portraits. So the first series, I wanted to do 3 photographs, one with the subject looking at the camera, one with the subject looking away, and one using a prop. I gave you these 3 on the bottom here. This one on the right, the wedding one, clearly a wedding environment. The prop in this case was really the paraphernalia, you know, the bridal veil and the tux and all that kind of stuff. The one on the left is a person in their workplace, and some of you tried that and I think had some success and some not quite as successful, but let's look at some of the good ones here. Landon Brooks, he saw what he thought would be a good environmental setting, and I love the idea that the young boy is on his horse and right behind him are real horses. So this is nicely lit. I would say he was out there later in the afternoon because the light appears to be kind of low. It's often a really good time to take photographs, and I think he did a good job on this one. This is Allison Smith, and the environmental setting here is a workplace, which is great. I think she did an excellent job of working with her subject, and this is a very pleasing photograph. On a technical side, I think the composition could have been better. She's pretty well centered here. I took the liberty of making an example of using this photograph, and I cropped it so that we could apply the rule of thirds. Now remember that rule of thirds is one of the main composition tools that you're going to want to use. And you got a horizontal line that divides it here and here into thirds, and you have vertical lines here and here. So by moving the subject back up this way, you can see that there's a little more interest and there's a little less of the background too. I would encourage people to get a little bit closer to their subjects. Let's look at this and look at that. And I can tell you that as we move into the photo editing process, you'll be able to do things like crop photographs. It's sort of a way of recomposing a photograph. All right, environmental setting 2, Landon again using the same setup that he had before. Now the boy here, his face is towards the camera, but he's not looking at the camera. That's really good. And again, the out of focus back here with the horses makes it interesting. This is the bokeh effect, where the subject is in focus and the background is not. And if you haven't mastered this, go and reread some of the articles that are in the previous assignments, and there's some specifically on this, and even using cell phones to do this. On the third environmental shot, I asked you to use a prop. So again, Landon is using the same subject here, and this is really cool because you got a line of thirds for the kid and you got a line of thirds sweet spot for the hat. So kind of a double thing, but that's a great shot. It really is. This environmental setting by Theresa Lawson really works because the floral effect totally is surrounding the subject. She's very centered on this, and it really works. The rule of thirds doesn't always apply. One thing is perhaps a little less of this room between the top of the head and the edge of the frame is called headroom, and I think there's a tendency to have too much headroom, and so kind of get in the habit of lessening that somewhat on your portraits, but this is a very nice photo. Allison Smith was in a work environment, and this again is a nice photo. Probably could have been a little closer, or a little too much headroom, I think, is the main issue here. I definitely like how these sparks are flying out here, and really creates a very interesting photograph. In the constructed setting, what I really was looking for was not just going out and shooting people in an environment that's already there. You had to do something a little different, and it could have been how you place the individual. It could have been using some props to accentuate a particular look you're trying to get. This one down here is a constructed setting. You notice the back over here, this part is not painted for some reason, and here he's got the paintbrush over his eye for some reason, but that's really an interesting photograph. So what did you guys do? Well, Jade had some really, really great photos, and this one, the constructed part of this is very much the lighting. These little, probably like Christmas lights or something like that in the background, they're out of focus because of the bokeh effect, and that's great. The attention is totally on the subject over here, and I really like the fact that her head is slightly tilted. The lighting here is great. A little more light on this side than on this side, which is really a very effective way of doing it. And Jade also, same subject, different setting, but again, a constructed set with these lights back here and the use of the lighting. This is the one where the subject is looking away from the camera. This is Landon in his constructed setting with the prop. And one of the things that makes this really great, aside from the fact that he kind of captured the moment here with the cookie, is the use of color. And look at all the yellow that's here. And that really works. I probably would have liked to have a little less on this left side over here. Maybe a little more of the table would have been okay. In other words, if she was up, her head was up in this sweet spot a little bit more. Again, that's something that could easily be fixed with photo editing and cropping. But in general, you want to try to do that kind of composition thing in the camera and not rely upon editing tricks to make it work. Theresa Lawson had this constructed setting. I think it's clever, a little bit humorous. That's all good. A little too much headroom. Maybe could have been over here a little more. Particularly, it's okay that she's not looking at the camera, but see how her arm's going out here? If she was over here a little more, that would actually work really nicely to have a little more space on this side. But a clever idea, and it works. All right, candids are just kind of an approach to taking the portrait. And what I was really looking for here was, obviously you're working with a poser subject, but you wanted to look kind of like it's just happening and not quite so posed. It's a pretty gray line there, but we did see some good photos, and this is one of them, Allison Smith. Really like how the spontaneity of this. Yeah, she knows the camera's there. She knows she's having her photo taken, but it's almost as if she had just taken the photo herself, and just her general sense of glee here, I think, is great. Nice backdrop here with the couple back here makes it a little interesting. Maybe a little more rule of thirds sweet spot would have helped it a little bit, but it's not a big deal. This is the one where you're looking away, and Landon, this is one of the best photos that was submitted. The very stark backdrop here makes the whole lighting works so well. It's pretty flat lighting, but it's extremely effective. And I think one of the things, again, is to take lots of photos. And digital photos don't cost any money, so you should really take a lot of them. And I was recently at an event where I shot about 90 photos, and I kept about 10. And that's because I don't want to put out bad photos. I just want to get the ones that are going to work. Theresa Lawson, this is the prop. And this is an interesting approach on the composition, because it's really using this kind of diagonal line that's partly created by the pose itself and partly created by the prop. It's not a vertical, it's not a horizontal. I think it's really clever, and it really works nicely. Now, I wanted you to do 3 of your own choice. I was really hoping to not see just 3 of exactly the same subject and setting, although in some cases I had some students submit stuff like that worked. But I want a little bit more variety from some of you. You're basically doing the entire exercise in one place and not changing stuff up very much. And I'm looking for a little bit more thought and a little bit more effort on the part of some of you. Let's look at some of these that were submitted. Landon has this one. I think this is excellent, nicely done with the lighting. And what really makes it is actually the framing of the open car door. And very, very nice. Allison has this one here, and I could quibble with it a little bit. It has too much headroom and could be possibly over the subject's head, could be over in this sweet spot a little more, but it's really clever and definitely works. Very nice lighting, actually. So that's a good one. And Jade Williams, again, had just some great portraits. This one here on the left is one of my very favorites of all the ones that were submitted. And I think it's because it just really does such a great job of capturing sort of an essence of this woman. Really nicely accentuates the eyes. The fact that her top of her head is cut off a little bit, it doesn't matter. This really fills the frame, really accentuates the face. Great, great portrait. This is also extremely good. Again, there's not a headroom issue here. And it's really nicely lit because the brightness of his face is really what draws you in. Now, neither one of these is doing the rule of thirds thing, and it's because they're close. You're in. You fill the frame with the face. You don't have to worry about whether it's on the thirds line or not, because it's filling the frame. This also has some really nice light. Obviously, the face has got good light on it, but these areas are in shadows a little more. With the hair, you can still see definition, and that's great. Also, the little bit of background with the lights really helps out. Otherwise, it'd just be kind of limbo black here. But this lets you know there's something back there. So these are two really, really nice portraits from Jade Williams. So let's kind of review. If you're doing portraits, more faces, usually about the face. Watch your composition, and that's two things. Rule of thirds, when it's appropriate, and the headroom. Please, please read the instructions on every one of these assignments. Also, I need you to provide information for each photo. Some of you are really doing this great and have been doing it great. The camera that you use. Some of you use more than one camera, so I want to know on each one. If you use the same camera for the whole thing, you can just kind of put it on the first photo, and that's fine. I'm trying to find out what you're trying to do. What are you trying to accomplish? And that's not just saying, I thought the cat looked cute. You need to kind of say you were trying to capture this by using lighting, or trying to capture this by the background, or just be a little bit more thoughtful about what you're trying to do. And then give me your camera information for each of the photos you submit too. If you've got the SLR that can tell you the specific ISO, shutter, and f-stop, please record those and submit them. If you have a point and shoot camera, it's possible that you can get the ISO, but you may just have a setting that's like nighttime setting, or action setting, or landscape setting. Whatever you have, put it down. And cell phone cameras do have some of this information. If you've got like a really good Samsung, makes really great camera phones, and you can get information that's equivalent to ISO, shutter, and f-stop from those. By the way, you can also get some apps if you're using your cell phone, and some of them are free, but more often you're going to spend maybe $5 or something like that. And you can get apps that will really let you adjust things using the app in a way that an SLR camera can do. So you might want to think about that. But in general, I was really pleased. We had some just outstanding portraits, and I encourage you to keep taking the portraits. We're going to start getting into the image editing where you'll be using software. The software you use is called Pixlr, Pixlr, and it's free and it's online. So if you can get to a computer, you can edit. And we will be doing some simple stuff, and then we'll move it up a little bit to do some other tricks. And really, with Pixlr, it's very much like Photoshop. You can do some great stuff. But at this point, what I really want to emphasize, though, is to try to do as much of the composition and the lighting in the camera. And then you can kind of tweak it a little bit in the editing. You don't want to have to kind of bail out and save every image with editing. But that's something that's coming up next. And if you have any questions, please let me know.